plus years working with a range of beef producers, some of which have been involved in integrated supply chains, and we'll perhaps discuss what I mean by that and what you guys think by that, but also calf rearing all the way through to suckler producers and all the way through those sort of systems. So James asked me if I'd come tonight to sort of have a bit of discussion about what I find from my beef farmers, what they're looking for from dairy farmers, and I've also got some dairy farmers who sort of give my viewpoint on what they say they want from a beef rearer or an integrator. But I'm hoping that within the participants there's going to be some more qualified people to answer those sort of questions as well. But I'm hoping that, yes, please, you take up James's option there of sort of posting some questions. One thing I will make clear is that I'm not a font of all knowledge. I don't know everything. I find life's about learning and picking up on people's experiences. So I'm happy to share some of the things I've come across. But likewise, if there's anything that you guys out there have think is relevant and could help somebody, then I hope you'd also share those things with us as well.
Well, I'm going to give everyone 5 more seconds to answer the poll. Alan, thank you so much for joining us. Really do appreciate your time on a blustery evening. Right, so we're going to end the polling, and that's actually quite interesting. So I'm going to share the results with everybody. And somebody said they can't answer because they're a dairy calf buyer rather than seller, and that's all right. So the majority of you buy direct off farm or sell through the market. So the first one was multiple choice, but nobody uses an agent here, and nobody is already part of an integrated scheme. Maybe that's because you don't know what an integrated scheme is, but we'll explain that in a minute. And then here, I think that's quite interesting. So only one of you records a calf on every single, sire of every single animal. Although you know, a large number of you try to do as many as possible, but the majority don't. That's really interesting, and given the discussion we're about to have. But then obviously TB, very polarizing as it is for everybody. It is a huge issue for some, you know, massive issue if you have TB, and then for a lot of us like me, TB is not an issue because we're in a no TB area. So that's very interesting. So Alan, when we talk about integrated beef, what is that? And if I'm a dairy farmer, you know, could you explain that to me?
Well, yeah, like anything, everybody's got their own interpretation. But for me and the schemes that I'm aware of and some of my clients have worked with, an integrated supply chain is where it involves everybody throughout the whole supply chain has a say in how this animal is going to be produced. So it usually has the end start at the far end. There's usually a retailer involved, and the retailer will be there to sort of say their customers, they want a certain type of animal, be it a breed or a certain type of specification to meet their customers' requirements. So the supermarket or the retailers will go then to their processors, and they'll say to them, we want to promote these, go and find us those animals. And so you've got the retailer setting the spec, the processor is then in charge of trying to source those animals. And most of these schemes that I operate in are for the dairy cross. There are some suckler ones out there, but predominantly they're dairy cross. So you then have to run to the other end of the chain and sort of start with the dairy farmers.
Yes, which is why we're here tonight.
That's it. So we got the processors from the retailer saying, look, you know, the common ones are a native breed, be it an Angus, be it a Shorthorn, be it a Hereford. Let's be honest, those are the most common schemes out there. So you've got going to the dairy farmer sort of saying, look, we want you to inseminate your cows with these type of bulls. They may even be as specific as to name specific sires. So, and we'll come on to sort of sires and why that sire name is so important a bit later on. What you'll then find is that some of the processors will have their own rearing relationships. So they will negotiate direct with the dairy farmer on those calves if they meet their requirements, pick them up and put them into their own rearing unit. They'll rear them to around about 16 weeks of age, and then they will sell them out to either somebody to grow them and finish them or straight to a finisher. But there's a commitment by the processor, backed by the retailer, say we will buy that animal when it is ready, providing it is under a certain age and within a certain weight and specification.
So what's the benefit? So, you know, in this situation, why would I want to be involved in that?
Depends where you are within that supply chain.
So if I'm a dairy farmer, what's the benefit to me?
So primary benefit to the dairy farmer is that, you know, you've got a guaranteed market for your outlet for your calves. A number of these schemes will also tell you what they will pay you for the calf in advance. Now, one specific scheme will tell you at the point of insemination how much they will pay you when that cow calves. Other ones will tell you sort of 6 to 8 weeks or 2 months in advance that calf, following the market price to some degree, but therefore these calves are going to be at this value. The other advantage to some dairy farmers, but you have to push your integrator to understand, is that they will also, one, commit not just to take your specific animals, but also will collect all male calves that you have. And some of them will also guarantee an outlet if you happen to be broken down with TB. That's why the TB question was quite interesting.
So it's a consistency. So there's a real consistency there. It's a consistency of price, of outlet, and TB as well, being sort of the three key benefits.
Yeah, and it's most dairy farmers' priority is milk production. And so it just takes that bit of hassle or factor away of, I'm going to have these calves, what do I do with them? But, you know, if you're a block calving herd, then there's still a number of schemes that are interested in you. They just need to know in advance. And I guess the key thing for an integrated scheme and what you see is that there is actually a communication flow all the way up and down the line. So while the retailer might be the one initially setting, this is what they want, they'll take on board the feedback that comes from the dairy farmer saying, well, we won't use those because they might not be the easiest to calving bulls. That's why we're not using them and things like that. So that information flow starts to move up and down the line. So that's why it's a supply chain.
But a lot of the benefit that Breedr brings to sort of suckler farmers and calf rearers, the integrated scheme does for the dairy farmer as well. That ability to look at the data moving up and down the supply chain. This is when we start to getting into the like I mentioned, there's some big schemes. There's also a number of farmers and I have a number of clients who operate their own, what they would class as an integrated scheme. So they have a close working relationship with 3 or 4 dairy farmers, and they will then have that commitment to take those calves. They will have an end market in mind, but that might not be retailer aligned, but they will know where they are going. And those ones actually, I'll be honest, I find work best because it's back to that communication. And then it also comes to the information flow. So I know what one of my clients likes is because he's been using Breedr and he's got the dairy farmer to use the Breedr, is that when he picks up a calf, and if within 48 hours, 36 hours, that calf looks a bit unwell, he doesn't have to phone the dairy farmer to see what's happened. That information is there, so he can already see if that animal looked a bit off before, if it's had the right amount of colostrum, if there was any particular issues with it when it was born, was it backwards, was there any difficulty? So he has that information. It just means he can make a more informed decision. So that works really well. Well, guys, do ask questions. Alan is the font of all knowledge. I know nothing, but I'm the conduit that you can use to get to Alan. So ask questions as we go through. So Alan, what are the key things as a dairy farmer what I should be thinking about when looking at one of these schemes?
The key, dairy farmers, the key priority is going to be milk production. So it's trying to find a scheme, because all these schemes operate slightly differently. So it's which scheme suits your dairy system best.
So sort of my calving profile, that sort of thing.
It's calving profile, but it's also the way that you like to manage your cows. Some of the schemes, for example, are very prescriptive. So they will insist, one, that you make sure the calf gets colostrum. They will insist that you have put an EID tag in it as one of the tags that has to go into a calf. They will also, in some cases, ask you to vaccinate for BVD or something like that already within your herd. They're also talking about wanting to understand your own medicine, vet and med policy. And so that you might feel that's too much interference. So that might not be for you. Whereas the other ones you might think, no, that is for me, that's the way I like to work. I'm happy to share that information. So I think that's one of the areas, is making sure you understand what their requirements is. It's then, understanding how often do they collect, what frequency, obviously the price. Some charge for collection, some don't. Some, will give you the semen for free, some don't. There's that many different quirks and with these schemes, it's very rarely does the first one necessarily mean it's the right one for you. So do your research. There are a number of different ones. And what I say is, if anybody is interested in schemes, then either they've got, come to yourself, James. I know Breedr knows a lot of integrated different schemes, so we'll have more of information. But there's, and then if James isn't sure or Breedr isn't sure, then come to me and see if I can find somebody, depending where you are geographically.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, on Breedr, we have, many of those smaller schemes that you talked about, where it's sort of farmer-led supply chain, but it still feeds into a processor and then a retailer. And we have several those supply chains who use Breedr to manage the whole chain. So yeah, if you're listening to this and interested, do get in touch. So I mean, Alan, what other considerations? We saw that the majority of people here don't record the sire on the passport, but that seems to be a requirement of an integrated scheme.
No. I don't think dairy farmers perhaps realise the importance to any beef producer actually of understanding the sire name. It's amazing now how many beef farmers, using software and systems such as what Breedr does, are able to evaluate the performance of the animals while they're on their unit. And one of the key ways of evaluating it is by the sire. And so if that information isn't there, as somebody trying to market calves, that's always a back foot straight away. Most integrated schemes will insist on you making sure it's, they're setting the genetics, therefore they want that sire detail on the passport. But even if you're not in an integrated scheme, I'd urge you to start putting that data on, because it's amazing how many beef farmers will know what bulls to look out for from what sort of breeds. And so even if you're still selling it, there's quite a few there still selling them through the marketplace, having a name of that will make a difference, no doubt about it.
Alan, we've got a question. We've got a question from the audience. Is there a scheme that takes New Zealand crossbred calves? So I'm presuming there's New Zealand breeds.
So it's the smallest, probably the smaller stature cows, which are probably block calving.
Mel described these as grass rats the other day. So I think she meant as a term of endearment rather than as an insult. But the efficient milking cows is what we'll call them.
Yeah. Yes, there are a few. So what you'll find is probably not so much the bigger players in the arena, but certainly there's a few of the more smaller independent supply chains. Yes, they do. It will come down to, though, again, the genetics. If you're putting everything to a black and white and all you're producing is black and white bulls from those type of cows, no, there isn't a scheme. Okay, that you're going to struggle to find somebody other than Butilar, let's be honest, that's going to collect those calves. If, though, you have the smaller stature cow, you're using either sex semen, so you have some of your herd you can put a beef sire on, then yes, there are schemes out there. There are people looking for those. And I've also got somebody who's also will look at, if you're geographically in the right areas for them, even if you're in a TB restricted area and TB is an issue, they are looking for those now. I'm not here to promote any individual scheme at all.
You're here to promote breeder scheme, Alan.
Yeah, but for people with those, they're still willing to pay, but let's be honest, you're not going to be, the price that you will receive for those calves isn't going to be fantastic, but they will throw in the semen or offer the semen to you as a way. So it's finding out exactly, as I say, what do you need as a dairy farmer. But there are a few out there, but all I would say as well is though, what an integrator will do is look at how those calves perform, regardless of now just sire. They'll be tracking those animals, and they can tell by the time that animal's got to 10 weeks of age how it was looked after initially on the dairy farm. And if, I'm not saying anybody here does it, but if it's a case of it's a beef calf, I'm not going to get much money for it, so it doesn't matter. If that's the approach, you will find an integrator will soon part company with you, because if there isn't the money in the system for them allowed to do that. But if you're still willing to put the effort into them, yes, you will find people willing to take your calves.
Well, I hope that answers your question. If it doesn't, do let us know and we'll do a follow-up. So, Alan, one of the other things, we talked about how, you need to have the SAR, it's useful, and the EID tags. But one of the other things you said to me on the run-up to this is that you need to think about how you're feeding your calves, because, a lot of people do bucket calves, but you were saying they have to be on the teat. So you can't use a bucket calf in an integrated scheme.
It's not that you can't. Again, it's back to understanding what's expected. A lot of the larger scale integrated schemes, once they've collected the calves from the dairy farm, they're going to go onto an automatic milk machine and therefore a teat. And a lot of these schemes operate by filling up with either 80 to 120 calves in about a week to 10 days to a 2-week lead time. What they haven't therefore got, or they will do it, but what they don't want is to spend trying to teach a calf to go from drinking out of a bucket onto a teat. But again, if your system doesn't suit feeding calves on a teat, then that's one of the criteria you need to know and find out about. Has caught a couple of people out before, in the sense of that you sort of integrators automatically think every dairy farmer should feed with a teat, and they don't.
So we talked about earlier about the consistency and how that's important, the consistency of outlet, and that's the benefit to me as the dairy farmer. But how do the schemes value the calves? Because you're saying that the value really varies.
Yeah, most of the most successful ones come, like anything, through a relationship. So in the early days, let's be honest, everybody's a little bit nervous about a relationship because we're not quite sure who's who. Calves are often, there's usually a base price, which is predominantly linked to whatever the market price is, depending on the breed. So your natives, be it an Angus, be it a Hereford, be it a Shorthorn, will have a slightly different price. Your Continentals will have a different price. Your black and whites will. Obviously, heifers and steers will have various prices as well. There is usually a minimum weight requirement expected, and that can be anywhere between 40 kilos to 50 kilos at a certain age. They call it the weight for age. Again, find out what that is depending on the breed, because again, if you have these smaller stature cows and they're saying they want something that's going to be 50 kilos at 15 days of age, you're not going to get there. So don't sign up to those schemes. But I think so there's that element. Some of them will then some will pay over, so you have a base price for say 50 kilos at 15 days of age. If that animal though is actually 55 kilos, you then get an extra so many pence per kilo above the base price. Some producers don't. So there's that. There's also though confirmation. So some will have a simple ABC type confirmation. So A being fantastic confirmation that really looking good. B is just an average one, and C is the poorer conformation calf. So again, it will be, there's the base price. If it's a C calf, it's going to be X pounds back from that. But all this again should be presented to you up front, as and when prices change. If they haven't given you a guaranteed price for a set period of time, that should all be transparent, and so you can see that all the way through. Some of the more radical schemes, which are operated predominantly by smaller producers, will give dairy farmers an option to take a lower price for the initial calf, but if the rearer or the integrator provides information about how that calf performs throughout its life, if then when that animal is finished and it's killed younger than expected but still met the weight grade, therefore has provided it in with a better return, he will share a percentage of that back down to the dairy farmer.
Yeah, so we've got a breeder farmer who does that. He's got a couple of dairy farms and a couple of finishing units, and with Breedr, because it passes the weight data and the finishing data when the animal's killed back down to the dairy farm. It's exactly what they do. It's very transparent.
And so yeah, so and that's it, and that's where I think things like Breedr help, because within the beef sector, they're wanting to see more data and understand what's happened to these animals during their life. Primarily, it's to do with growth rate and medicines, but obviously anything more that can be added to do with feeds. You know, quite a few are wanting to try and make sure there's no soya been fed during it. How much time has it had at grass? Any of that information all provides the beef guy with alternative outlets, and obviously most of them recognise that needs to be shared down the chain as well, back to the dairy farmer, so that they can benefit. And that's what, to me, an integration scheme is. A good one is where it's information but also risk and reward is moving up and down the chain as well, so everybody sort of feels a part of it and they're in this together.
So Alan, we've heard a lot about the benefits, what's involved, but what are some of the challenges or risks that you might want to think about before you get into bed with one of these?
Once you get in there.
Or a better analogy, when you fill your cows full of someone else's semen.
Yeah, no. I think the biggest risk, I think, is one, if you break down as a dairy farmer with TB, what's going to happen to your calves? Are they still going to be collected? And what you also want to know is what price are you going to receive? And again, doesn't apply to everybody. A big issue for dairy farmers when shut down is the build-up of those calves on that holding. So how quickly and how will they deal with it? Most integrators should be able to help you so that doesn't become an issue, but you want to know. And what you want to know is, if they can't, where does that leave you? Because some of them, especially if they've supplied the semen to you, are expecting X number of calves back. Now, what happens if you can't fulfill that? Where does that stand? So there are contracts. These things don't just work by word of mouth. There is a contract, and it is worth reading it, even if you think you've had all the verbals and you understand it. Just check those smaller bits.
I heard a great story it probably was from about 10 years ago, when one of the integrated schemes started, and they sent some calves to a finishing unit and said, we'll be back in 12 months to pick those up, please. And then they called up the farmer about 2 weeks before they expected the animals to be ready, and they say, oh, the lorry's booked for 2 weeks' time, and the farmer said, oh, I'm sorry, the price was great at market last week, so I took them down and sold them.
Yeah. That's not entering into the spirit of what I would class an integrated scheme. But and that's the thing, I think, from a dairy farmer you have to be mindful of. There will no doubt be times when the market price will be higher than the price you're getting paid currently for your calves. There will be, and it's being prepared that it's not worth the extra 10 quid, because in the longevity, knowing those calves are going to be collected, knowing that if you do get shut down with TB, they will still collect your calves, is that worth something to you? So those are the elements that I think to be wary of.
And one of the other things, so we've got a breeder, we've got an 8-week calf report. So what happens when you sell a calf through Breedr as a dairy farmer is if you sell it to one of our rearers, we can show you where that calf is up to 8 weeks of age, which I know for Arla, they've just introduced a requirement for that. And if you're on a supermarket contract, you've had to do that for a year or so now. But that obviously is also a consideration, is generally these integrated schemes, because there's some management involved, it's safer to sell through them than it is to sell through the market or something like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, it's becoming more and more, and I think even isn't Red Tractor. I think about, we won't get into what hours and wares about Red Tractor, but I think aren't they doing a review, and it's one of their requirements, I think, that they put out in their consultation, isn't it, about things like this? So yeah, I can sort of see where it's coming from, but I think it's still, you know, I do feel for the dairy farmer. If you're in a difficult position and you can't find a home for your calves, what are you meant to do? You know, it can be challenging.
Yeah. We're gonna, if you've got the time, we have a few questions. So guys, do ask questions. We're probably gonna go for a little bit longer. A question here from Dairy Farmer: do you see there being more of a requirement for native and rare breeds in these schemes? Is there a regional element? And this questioner has seen that there is a Longhorn scheme, which I think is a Butalar scheme, with Morrison's, isn't it? For the Longhorn.
So generally, what you'll find is a lot of the schemes with retailers are consumer led. So, and it's all about selling the story. So yes, there's the big demand, and if you look at HDB's data, you'll see that native breeds over the last 5 years are significantly increasing in their share of the beef breeds compared to continentals. Limousins still do very well. Charolais are coming down significantly. Simmentals are practically nearly extinct from a dairy cross point of view, and the native breeds are coming. That's because consumers have been told that, you know, native breeds are grass-fed. That's the other story. They all like that concept, rightly or wrongly so. We're not here to discuss that, but that's the message that's there, and that's what the consumers want. So love them or hate retail supermarkets and retailers, they do sell like 80% of our fresh produce. So that's where the consumer goes. Now there's lots of other opportunities besides for those, but they do sell the majority of it. So that's what their consumers are telling them. That's where they'll go. Yes, you do find they're regional, and the reason they're regional is often to do with where the processor is based and to do with haulage. So there is some variance, but pretty much I think nationally, Angus and Hereford are very much national schemes. But then once you start going into your Shorthorns, they seem to be predominantly a little bit more up the northwest, because that's where sort of, I think it is predominantly Morrison's that do those, and that's where their plants are. So, but like I said, there's other ones. The one that's coming up strong, which isn't that lined yet to retailers, but is the Wagyu breed. There's a number of different schemes now starting with those sort of genetics, and looking for dairy farmers to align with.
Yeah,
so
we've got a big Wagyu cross breeder who uses Breedr in their supply chain. So yeah, I can see what you mean. Alan, we have a question here wonderfully that says, how does Breedr fit in? But it is from somebody who works at Breedr, so they would ask that. But so how does Breedr fit into sort of an integrated sort of supply chain? And if you can't answer, I can. So
well, you'll be able to answer it better. But from what I've seen from my clients that are using, my beef farmers that are using Breedr, is the bit that they're liking most of all is that they also have got 3 or 4 dairy farmers that they collect from, and the dairy farmer has the Breedr app as well. So when the cows are calving, they can record all the information on the app there and then, and they can use it as a way of when he then comes to collect those calves. I said all that information is moving across. It allows him to evaluate straight away how those calves are performing all the way through, and he shares that information back down to the dairy farm. And what we find is quite interesting, and it's not pitching one another against dairy farmer against dairy farmer, but it also allows us to actually identify areas within a dairy farm where things might not be quite as good as they originally thought. So if we've got performance of the same sire, but we can see that for some reason they're slightly under at a 100 days age than somewhere else, we can go back, we'll go back to the dairy farm and sort of have a discussion, show them the data, sort of say, you know, is there something we could be doing a bit different here? What is that management to try and help? So that's where I've seen it, but obviously you talk about breeder.
Weekend calves is probably the other thing as well, is seeing the drop of performance over the weekend when the relief herdsman takes over. That's another thing that we see from time to time. No, I think Alan, spot on. You know, if you are listening to this and you're actually interested in integrated supply chain, you should get in touch with us. Alan, I've got a poll which we're going to show, another poll. So the question is, are you interested in being part of an integrated scheme? Yes, you've convinced me. I want to hear more. Nice idea, but not for me. So we'll see what people think of that as we go through it. But Alan, is there anything else that we've missed? Is there anything else you'd like to say, guys? This is your chance to ask, your final chance to ask questions. So, Alan, is there anything else that you would like to say to everybody about sort of integrated beef?
All I would say is, I say to any of my clients, I said, you've got to understand what opportunities are out there. Not every opportunity is going to suit you, and that's fine. But if you are wondering what to do with your calves, is there a better outlet or something for your calf? I think it's worth investigating time to look at what some of these schemes are. But it does come down to individuals. There's some people who will still like taking them to markets and selling them that way, and I get that, and there's still a need for people like that. There's a lot more though with COVID, I think, now looking at digital platforms as a way of marketing animals as well, and selling them through.
We've got one of those, so that's good. Right? We've got one of those, so that's good.
Through Breedr?
Yes, Breedr, yes.
Well, there you go, you see. So yes, so it's then using those sort of platforms as well. So I just think it's about understanding what there is. So I would say, have a look, see what you can find.
Well, Alan, we've convinced 30% of the people who answered the poll that integrated schemes are good. And there are some people who want to hear more. So what we're going to do is we're going to drop everyone who's answered this an email with a bit more information. And Alan, how can everyone, if they want to get your worldly wisdom, how can people get in touch with you?
I have a really long email, so the easiest route and to keep communication is they come to you, James.
Yeah, they want to email me and I'll send them on to you.
And direct them to me. That way you haven't got to take too many contact details.
Okay, great. So guys, my email is james@breedr.co. If you want to get hold of Alan, you can email me and I'll forward your email on to him. And if any, and the people who've answered this question, we'll get in touch with you some more information about how Breedr can help you to get involved in integrated beef.
I would just say, if anybody is Breedr contacts you, just let them know geographically where you are, because, like I say, that depending where you are geographically based means that in some cases there's more integrators than others. So that, you know, that's a good starting position for them and for me.
Are you saying if I'm a dairy farmer on Orkney, I might be in trouble?
No, that one's fine. No, that's the sort of thing I'm thinking. If you're up in Orkney, I don't know where you'd sell your milk if you're up there, to be honest. But,
Alan, can you pick a number between 1 and 15 for me, please?
1 and 15, 11.
Yeah. 11. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 9, 10, 11. So Paul Wayne, you are the winner of our competition. So Chloe will be sending you a tablet holder, a Breedr beanie, and some touchscreen gloves, and we'll ask you about what size your tablet is, or your phone if you don't have a tablet. So, but yes, Paul Wayne, congratulations on a little competition. Alan, I'm just going to tell everyone what's happening next week. So next week we've got a finisher webinar, which if you're into finishing, Ian is hosting that. It's going to be about farmer-led livestock supply chains it has a very airy-fairy for a new post-Brexit era, but it's about running your own supply chain. So these are the people who'll be buying your integrated calves. And then next month, the dairy guys, we're all back together. I've got a chap called Phoebe joining us. He's a vet. And we're going to be looking at proving the value of your genetics and calf health. And Phoebe's going to be talking about that with me, which is going to be really interesting. I'm actually really looking forward to that. So, Alan, somebody has asked, how do you get to know about these schemes? So the best thing they can do is email us, james@breedr.co, and then I'll share your email with Alan and we'll introduce you. But where else can they hear about, find out information about these?
Depends who your milk supplier is. So it might be surprised, but some of the major, the bigger ones, the Arlas, the Mullers and such like, they will, they'll actually know of a few of the largest type schemes that are in operation, I would have thought. I know Arla certainly did a big piece because of their every calf has a value. Processors, so if you know of a certain processor, you may or already contact them to see if they have any schemes that they are running. Those are probably the two starting places, if you don't come to Breedr, or just social media. You're on here via Zoom. Social media, Twitter is the one that I follow people on. I don't post much myself by the time I'm not very quick for posting stuff by the time I do the
stuff, Alan. I get a little occasional Saturday message from you. Occasionally on someone else's post.
Occasionally, but yeah, that's asking and seeing there. What else?
Somebody has said that I think this person is saying they supply one of the Welsh processors. So you're asking your question anonymously, so I don't know who you are, but I know the milk supplier you mentioned. We've been talking to them, so do drop me an email, and it'd be great to talk to you about that. And then we know your milk supplier as well if you wanted to have a chat with them and have a conversation in the round. Somebody has said that they are looking for dairy farmers near them for a calf rearing enterprise, and they're looking for natives and blues, which is excellent. And actually, that leads us nicely on, Alan, is next week we are launching a new way to buy and sell livestock. It's called Breedr Livestock Trading, and it's going live from next week. So you'll be able to buy and sell all sorts of livestock, open to every farm. We've had lots of farmers using it last autumn, but we're now making that live for everybody. So this person, I have their name now, so I'm going to be asking them. We've got calves that they can buy. And is there anything else anyone wants to say, or should we call it an evening? What are you doing now, Alan? Have you had your tea?
Gonna have my dinner, yes.
I've already had mine. So, well, thanks so much for joining us. Remember, if you want to ask Alan any questions, you can email me, james@breedr.co. Thank you so much for joining us, and we're back next month, and we're doing a talk all about proving the value of your genetics. Alan, thank you for joining me. I've really appreciated your time and talking to you.
No.
And
thanks for joining us.
We'll ping a recording of this round to you guys, just for you. Yeah, thanks for your time.
How delightful, eh? All right, thanks a lot, guys. Everybody, take care.
Bye.
Bye.